So Radhika, again, thank you so much. The reason to really have you here is to hear you. Really, for everyone here is also to learn from you. And we do understand that an hour may not be enough to change all perspectives, but we really are hoping that at least a change of perspective happens of how everyone is looking at this space and what we are trying to do under the banner of the House of Abhinandan Lodha. I just hope I did not forget anything. I think I forgot to mention in her introduction, she has 1.5 lakh Twitter followers, so quite a celebrity even in the social media. So good we didn't paste the invite on social media, nahi to zyada log ho jate.
Yeah, that was a very good idea.
So what does it feel like to be this young achiever, honestly?
So I don't think about it too much. That's genuinely the real answer. For me, I've thought over the years, and people ask what success means. And to me, I think success means the ability to make an impact on people's lives with what you do. It could be in the work you do, and I am very fortunate to be a part of an industry that makes an impact on people's lives, because I think whether it is land or mutual funds, we are not in some product selling business. We are finally in the business of enabling dreams. I think that's
correct.
And that's how I think about my job. I remember in my first trimester of pregnancy, there was a nurse that used to come to give me injections, and I think she figured out I was from the mutual fund industry a few weeks, because I was always on call while taking these injections.
During the...
And so then she comes to me and she says, I want to start an SIP. And I said, okay, why are you asking me? She said, I figured out you're from the mutual fund industry, and I want to start an SIP so that my daughter lives a better life than I did.
Wow.
And there are so many of these stories. And I don't think many of us in the industries that we are in, whether it's yours or ours, realize that we have real impact on people's lives. It's also one of the reasons that I write as much as I do, and I do all the work on social media, because I think ultimately success is about sharing stories. It's about making an impact on people's lives. That's a life well lived.
Thank you so much. It resonates so well with our philosophy. We essentially, all of us here are storytellers. आप लोग agree करते हैं या नहीं agree करते हैं? At the end, हम storytellers हैं, right? So, but this is deep insight that it is not just the jobs that we do, but we are impacting lives. And if we can do it for the better, उससे ज़्यादा fulfilling कुछ हो नहीं सकता. Thanks for. I'm sure that's part of the book which recently got published. We have copies for everyone here. आप में से जो लोग sign करवाना चाहें, we'll have a session for you. I'm sure it's a page turner, but I hear that so is your life story. If in 2 minutes we can have your journey from childhood to where you are today, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so I think, and I'll tell you something else. I think everybody thinks they have a very ordinary life. And yet, I believe everyone has a very extraordinary life. And I will tell you my own background and story. But Limitless is a collection of stories and experiences about a young Indian, any young Indian, could be in any industry, it happens to be me, negotiating her way in an India of genuinely limitless possibilities, and talking about some of the difficult issues that we go through that sometimes are not talked about on the dining table. Like, हमारे यहाँ कहते हैं कि मेहनत करो, बहुत मेहनत करो लाइफ में.
Absolutely.
मेहनत करोगे तो अच्छे स्कूल में एडमिशन मिल जाएगा, फिर अच्छे कॉलेज में एडमिशन मिल जाएगा, फिर सुंदर लड़की से शादी हो जाएगी, फिर ऐसी किसी अच्छी कंपनी में हो जाएगा. बट व्हाट इफ़ यू डू ऑल दिस मेहनत एंड यू स्टिल फेल? रिजेक्शन आप कैसे हैंडल करते हैं? दिस इज़ वन थीम. वी वर टॉकिंग व्हेन वी वर सिटिंग देयर दैट these 3 words, लोग क्या कहेंगे, they are such an important part of our psyche, our self-confidence. And how do you really live a life of self-confidence? A third one that I talk about in this book, which is my favorite, is the fact that in all our lives, some form of Sharma ji ka beta exists. Now, you call him Srinivasan or Sen Gupta or whatever you want, or Shah, if you're from Gujarat. But there is a constant set of peer pressure and comparison. So, Limitless is a collection of stories talking about a journey and talking about issues that are in Indians' issues. There are tons of books, by the way, written, and much better books. But this is a young person's perspective, and this is an Indian's perspective, because our opportunities are unique and our circumstances
So true.
are unique.
No, I relate to the title much more now after that experience. But how much of it is your own journey and perspective?
I would say 60 to 70% of the book is my stories.
So what was really the inflection point for you? I mean, stellar career with, if I'm not wrong, McKinsey, New York, Wall Street, and then suddenly India. So the decision turning point as well as an inflection point in your career after that.
So I think there have been a couple of inflection points. One inflection point was deciding to move back to India, which I do cover in this book, and taking risks. I come from a family where nobody has worked in corporate India. My father was a very successful career diplomat. But इसका मतलब ये था कि हमारे घर में the terminology, there was no difference between real estate company, finance company, there was none of this. There was public sector, which was good people, and there was private sector, which was evil people. And everybody else was clubbed in private sector.
Okay.
So in my father's head, I was going to do political science and join the civil services. Wow. And till I became a CEO, he actually never forgave me for not doing so. And so that was, So
sorry, I have to interrupt, but one story which people shouldn't miss out is your father's decision between shifting to America and the holy grail of foreign services. Agar aap wo bata sakeं.
No, it was a little more wild than that. So he comes from a small town called Gango outside of, in Uttar Pradesh. Okay. And he cracked civil services, and he was 7th in the country, which is a huge deal. This was a guy who learned English at, when he was 19. So really humble family. Got into foreign services at 23, 24. And then his first posting after marriage, he had the option, which is what people have seen in my talks, of 2 lovely countries. One was Switzerland, and keep in mind he was newly married, and the second was Pakistan.
Okay, so between Switzerland and Pakistan, career choice. आप लोग क्या choose करते? The Alps, of course.
No, and keep in mind, नई शादी हुई थी. And my mother married a foreign service officer, assuming कि आदमी Switzerland लेके जाएगा.
ससुर जी ने तो सोचा होगा कि.
I mean, यश चोपड़ा की picture देखी थी. She had seen all that, and lo and behold, she was 6 months pregnant with me, and we moved to Pakistan.
So he chose Pakistan.
He chose Pakistan, and this was Pakistan at the time of Zia-ul Haq, which was Pakistan under martial law. Wow. So we had one of the old Bhutto houses that we lived in, and the ISI was camped right outside our house. And all phones were tapped. Now my parents...
And you knew that all the way?
Everybody knew everything. So all confidential conversations happened in the garden. And every morning, these guys from the ISI would tell my mother, Adab Begum, and she knew that they were there, and they knew that she knew, and a very interesting kind of acceptable dynamic played out, and that is where I happened to be born.
Wow.
And so then, I moved around countries.
But we are thankful for your journeys and leading you back here. So how did India happen then?
So India happened on a lark. I was, as I said, after moving around all these countries, and when you read Limitless, you'll read about some other glorious countries like Nigeria, where I've lived in. But I went to Wharton, where I did my undergrad. That is also a story in this book. And then I started my career on Wall Street. And as I said, I became a finance professional by sheer chance, not by background. 4 years into it, 2007 happened, and 8 happened, and I survived the layoffs of 2008. Now, all of us have memories of that period. In 2009, me and two friends decided we wanted to move back to India to start up a business. We felt, and I think this is actually an interesting analogy for what you guys are looking to do, that at that point, there was mutual funds and PMS, but there was no hedge fund and alternative investing happening.
Understood.
And that was our background. And we said, why not come back to India and do something disruptive? We couldn't have done that in the US because that industry was far more developed there. And we were 24. And I always say young blood is hungry and foolish, and there are good and bad things about that. So we literally decided to come back and set up a fully regulated asset management business at the age of 24.
At 24, wow.
At 24. We talked to SEBI, and we were also very clear, by the way, on how we wanted to build the business. So we know money is a business of trust. We didn't want a mom and pop shop. We set up all the regulations. We got the license. In fact, I drafted the SEBI application because we couldn't afford lawyers at that point. But that was a turning point. Because for someone who was a middle class kid to go abroad, who had studied on loans, who had survived Wall Street, no parent would want you to come back. And that's how this happened.
Wow. But great to have you here because essentially, at a very fundamental level, we are in the wealth creation business as well. And of course, so are you. Since we are in the wealth creation business, for our audience, could we just delve a bit deeper into how the investment mindset of the Indian retail consumer plays out? And while trying to and attempting to disrupt the industry, what have you seen, learned, what challenges we've faced, the financial services sector in the last decade, all of us have experienced in the last decade and a half has just exploded. So what have been your learnings and, really from the challenges as well as your ideas? Have you seen an open embrace from regulators, investors, distributors, or what has it been like?
I'll tell you, and I write this in the opening chapter of Limitless. I think those of us working in the wealth and financial services industry in India today underestimate how lucky we are. And the reason I say this is, we are sitting in a country where whether you look at your business or our business, I'll give you an example from mutual funds. Mutual fund penetration in this country is probably 5% of GDP. The world average is 40%. The world average is 40%. 40%. I keep telling people in my company, we don't have to fight with our neighbor. We have to go from 4 to 40. हमें तो 4 से 40 का फासला करना है. आपकी भी वही कहानी है, right? So we have tremendous room to grow in terms of penetration. We have so much growth. And the one thing that has changed since I moved back in 2009 is we underestimate the opportunity for disruption because the Indian retail consumer is open now. And he or she has gotten a lot more open-minded in the last 5 to 7 years. They're open-minded in terms of newer brands. And by the way, I know you guys are a very young brand. I also lead a company that was at least 5 years ago a very young brand. So they're open to new brands. They're open to new ideas. And they're open to anything that solves a tangible consumer problem.
Okay, so as long as you're solving a tangible problem.
As long as you're solving a tangible consumer problem, I think people are open. And I think the one thing I've also learned in years of financial services is that wealth products are finally about trust. Again, whether it's your industry or our industry. When you take people's money, if you can handle it with trust, I think people will come to you again and again and again.
Thank you so much. I'll just, because we couldn't speak about it earlier, but thanks to aap sabke participation se, I'd like to go back to the genesis and inception point of our brand, the House of Abhinandan Lodha. Since you mentioned trust, if I'm not wrong, it was July and August of 2020. COVID had hit. We were in the midst of the first lockdown. Nobody knew what's going to happen tomorrow or next week. Nobody knew. At that time, we launched our brand. About 1,500 customers, 1,475 to be precise. We were like crestfallen. We missed our target by 25 customers. So 1,475 customers during that lockdown paid token amounts to buy our product online without a single physical interface or going to the destination where they were purchasing. So kudos to your contribution.
Fantastic.
So that's the trust and faith reposed by our customers into this brand, and it's a huge responsibility. We get that, and thank you for resonating with that that word and that responsibility with us. And we'll just attempt to, as you rightly said, penetration is the key in India. And if I could have just my audience answer one or two questions, starting with my good friend Nitya, guess how many PAN card subscribers are there in India? Or anyone, wild guess. PAN cards. Sorry? Very close, very good. Yes. There are around 50 crore PAN card subscribers. How many SIPs are on right now in number of consumers? I mean, you'll know better, ma'am, but I think it will be less than 10 crores.
Definitely less than 10 crores.
So imagine 50 crore people have PAN cards. Out of 120, chalo bachcho ko chhod dete hain, you know, whatever. But out of 50 crore PAN card holders, we still have 9 crore demat accounts and 10 crore
mutual fund unique users would be 4-5 crores. That's
5 crores unique ones, yes. And there'll be overlaps between demat and so that is what she's saying, that Indian consumption story is huge, and we are just scraping the surface. Trust us, if we all get our act together and get it right, I mean, the world should be our playground. But beyond trust, what are the 2-3 key, I mean, when you would have 5-7 years back realized that this is the potential, beyond trust, what are the 2-3 other things which you or your extended arm, the trade partners, ended up doing right to really absorb this demand?
You know, I'll tell you a story from our industry, and I know a lot of your partners are here. I think you have to back ideas early. Many people, and you know, when you are in the business of disruption, you're trying to do unconventional things that everyone else is not doing. But doing them early and sticking to them is important. So I don't know if many of you guys would have heard of a company called NJ India Invest. They are based out of Surat. And they started their business in 1994. These are two Gujarati businessmen. And, you know, they dabbled with a bunch of things, stock broking. Us time corporate deposits bikti thi, 10 to 15% interest deti thi. And they used to pay brokers huge commission. At the same time, the mutual fund movement was just kind of taking off, and it had had fits and starts. But they saw in mutual fund a simple product that solved a consumer problem that was very regulated. And they said this could be an opportunity, and corporate deposits, while offering all these high rates of returns and huge brokerage to brokers, are not going to last. So they were very early entrants into the mutual fund space. And today, if you look at NJ India, they are the largest mutual fund distributors in India. They're based out of Surat. When I joined the industry in 2017, I went to NJ, and they have channel partners and sub-brokers. And I write about this in Limitless. They did an event in Goa University where there were 25,000 of them. They cut a cake for 40,000 crores of assets under management.
40,000 crores.
Today that number is 1.25 lakh crores.
My goodness.
And what has NJ India done? NJ India is sitting out of Surat, but they've backed an idea, and they've backed it early, and they've stuck to it. They're SIP sellers. They're the largest SIP sellers in the country. They account
1.2 lakh crores.
1.2 lakh crores. They account for about 8% of the entire MF industry's SIP book.
My goodness.
And they're using technology. I'm repeating again, they're not based out of a fancy office in Bombay. They're sitting out of Surat.
And doing
But
it.
they've stuck to the idea and they've done it early. So I think in the distribution business, finding a story and doing it with conviction, because a lot of people will copy what you do, but a lot of people will not do it consistently.
Yes, day in and day out with
And they stuck through it in 2008, and they stuck through
Understood.
it in 2013.
When all the naysayers would have been...
And then, in the last 5 years, when our industry saw the whole mutual fund Sahi Hai movement and more people came into the capital markets, they were there. And they were a beneficiary of the wave.
Which is so true of these days. There will be a long period of silence before the J curve kicks in, and thanks for that data point, क्योंकि यहाँ पे तो सब लोग multiply करना शुरू कर दिए अपने mind में 1.2 lakh crores multiplied by 1 or 2%. So if that can be one entity sitting out of Surat,
yeah.
And the mutual fund industry would be 30 lakh crores or
38 lakh crores.
38 lakh crores.
Yeah.
May say 1.2 lakh. This is unthinkable. I mean, we didn't know that. Thanks for that.
Unbelievable stories. And there are so many such stories. And I'm telling you this because they're not complicated business models.
Yeah.
They're simple business models of people who believed in an idea and stuck to it for a very, very long time.
Very long time. True. You get it. Just to put you in the spot. So if we come up, let's say hypothetically, not leaking any plans, we come up with a SIP proposition to own land. And we manage to get, this is crystal ball gazing. So if we manage to get a 30 to 40,000 rupee SIP maybe for 2-3 years, and that gets you a toehold into an asset class like land, what would be the market for such a proposition?
Okay, my mental math is not
Please.
very good. But I'll tell you something philosophically. You guys have a much easier task than we did as an industry because you're selling land. The average Indian understands land, right? We've grown up on gold and real estate in some sense. In fact, we guys are the ones who are taking market share away from you. You are the incumbent in that sense. If you can solve the problems that exist, and I loved one of the conversations your colleagues had with me. He said, we're not in the business of real estate. We're in the business of wealth as an asset class. I truly believe land is an asset class. All finance tells you that land is an asset class. If you can make land liquid, trustworthy and easily transactable, and the best thing the SIP did was cut the ticket size down to small amounts. If equity is a part of someone's asset allocation, why won't land be part of
Why would not?
Our SIP book as an industry today is 12,000 crores a month. That's what the mutual fund industry gets on a monthly basis in SIP flows.
Correct.
In the last 5 years, much more money has been added to India's capital markets via SIPs than all foreign investors put together.
Correct.
And this is something the finance minister acknowledged. So the size of opportunity is there for you, and equities is not comparable to land in its popularity in India today.
Great, thank you for that.
You're on a head start.
So it's up to us. If I'm not wrong, nearly 1.2 lakh crores in SIPs got added last year in a 12-month period. 1.2 lakh crore, my friends. अब इसके सामने हम जब आपके सामने लॉन्चेस लाएंगे, ये तो आपको लगे ये एक दिन का काम है, बिकॉज अगर हम एक महीने में, जैसे शी इज सेइंग, वी गेट 12,000 crores into wealth creation. The point is, whoever is doing this, average SIP size, ये सब छोड़ दीजिए, बट मार्केट में 12,000 करोड़ रुपए लोग पार्क कर रहे हैं फॉर वेल्थ क्रिएशन. Which just brings me to a few, generational cuts in demographics help you understand phenomena. So I'm coming to a question where, while we see this great number, we also see low penetration, and hence you're saying the market is humongous. in terms of consumer behavior, how early is early in investing and how late is late in investing?
It's getting earlier.
Okay.
In equities, we used to believe कि जो हमारे पास consumer आता था, they were 40 on average. We used to look at our data. That became 30. Now, today, the millennial consumer is an SIP customer. The largest amount of money that we get today is a millennial.
So 25 to 35 bracket.
20 plus bracket.
Wow.
In fact, with the advent of social media and so many financial services influencers, that age is getting younger because the average Indian is earning younger, he's more aspirational, he or she is more aspirational, he or she wants to do more. The ticket size will be much smaller at 20 or 30 than someone at 40. But remember, if you can convince someone at 20 that an SIP is an asset class, for me, this is someone whose income is going to grow through time. See, a 40 or 50-year-old consumer has peaked in life,
Plateaued,
right?
yeah.
He's plateaued. I mean, you're going down from there and you're actually going to withdraw money. But if you have convinced the 20-year-old early, you've got that consumer for 30, 40 years and it's a growing consumer. You know, I'll tell you something. I have been, it's probably the first time I'm saying this, I've been very critical of an asset class like cryptocurrency on social media because it's not regulated, it has all these problems. But the one thing you have to learn from them, and I believe there is something to learn from even the worst thing in the world, is that they have managed to attract attention of India's young population. There are sadly more cryptocurrency investors in this country than mutual fund investors. So the young consumer is a serious target base.
Wow. So, and you're seeing Gen Z also kick in at early 20s.
Absolutely.
Okay. Wow. But it's been I mean, it's not programmed, but it is so great a sync to have with you, because if you see, under our brand, we also pride ourselves, it's the new generation land for the new India. What we mean is actually a new thought process in the country. It just doesn't mean it is only youth or 20 years per se,
and you know,
but it is for the new generation.
I would just add this because I was having some conversations with your team. The one thing about catering to the Gen Z consumer is that we've learned is this is also a consumer who's buying on Amazon, who's used to 10-minute food delivery. So this is a consumer for whom trust is important and transaction ease and delivery.
Ease of transaction. So you've mentioned liquidity, if I hear correctly, simplicity of the product or the offering itself.
And buying experience. Yeah.
And the buying experience.
Because you think he compared, you know, in mutual fund industry, we always used to say, oh, we are more efficient than banks in buying. But a 20-year-old doesn't compare my experience to a bank experience. He compares my experience to ordering food on Zomato. And he's like, oh, that can be done in 5 minutes. So why can't this?
Yes.
So why can't land be done in 5 minutes, right? For me,
good luck to Zomato with regulation very soon. But are you seeing with fintech space gaining so much ground, have just like you mentioned NJ, you know, one of the partners you have, with fintech space and the advent of app-based and online investment, how much of a dent have they been able to make? Have they made a mark by now? Are they serious contenders, and are they part of your game plan?
Very serious contenders. Today, in our industry, about 15 to 20% of net new money comes from online financial platforms.
15 to 20% net new money
from
online platforms.
Yeah. So historical base is different because that's legacy. The amounts are smaller because they cater to, as I said, a younger generation of consumers.
Sure.
But are they making a dent? Of course they're making a dent. You know, 10 years ago, if in our business, outside of individual financial advisors, if a mutual fund CEO would take anyone seriously, it would be foreign banks, this, that, etc. You'd have 20 of these. Now 5 fintechs figure on that list.
Amazing. Wow. But it's surprising, from a challenge to get people to invest early, because I still remember another anecdotal story of one of our colleagues. She was like, I used to dread the LIC agent uncle as soon as he would enter the premises. यानी मैं कॉलेज में गई and LIC agent uncle हमारे घर आ गए कि बेटी के लिए आगे फीस भरने के लिए इन्वेस्ट करो. मेरी शादी हुई and invitation के साथ साथ LIC agent uncle हमारे यहाँ आ गए. So there was this 15 years back that, to catch him young was a challenge. Versus with the fintech revolution and simplified products and real access, we suddenly hear from you that it is the new generation, the young India getting into the fray.
So the picture has changed from the LIC uncle today to a consumer going on Instagram, having a 25-year-old, and there are downsides of this also, financial influencer who looks and talks their language, telling them about why they should invest in the stock market or mutual funds, and then recommending an app like Grow or ET Money where they go and they click and they start and they're done in 5 minutes.
My goodness. But is there a flip side to it that if I transact in 5 minutes, I'll be profit booking in 2 months, and I'll be exiting and switching funds in 6 months?
And that is the challenge. I think wealth is finally a long term. So our biggest challenge today is to bring, and probably yours also, is to bring in people for the truly long term, is to remind them that compounding, whether in land or in equities, happens over the long term. I give this strange analogy, and maybe I can give it now because it's the evening of whiskey. I think most of what we do is a little bit like single malts. If you've ever been to a single malt distillery, and I went to one in Scotland with my husband, it takes probably 15 days to actually mix a malt. But over time, then what happens? The malt sits in a cask and it just ages. And one of the things a distiller told me is that till 3 years, the product is not even legally qualified as whiskey because it just hasn't aged enough. And if you look at the price of a 12-year-old malt or an 18-year-old malt, the 18-year-old malt is not 50% more expensive than the 12-year-old malt. It's 100% more expensive.
Wow. So that's compounding.
And compounding keeps on happening. So the challenge is, in a world where we are impatient for even 5-second ads, to convince people that this is 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years.
Amazing. So that's quite a conundrum, and which is a great challenge to have. So while you want to make the product simplified, transactable, liquid, easy, and quick, and regulated, but with this behavior, you want to still inculcate keeping it for long. And this is something, can you just help again, putting you in a spot? Is the thumb rule of equities 5 to 7 years minimum? What would be your formula to give the working populace and the younger working populace in general, maybe 22 to 40 or lesser? What are the 3 mantras you would give for intergenerational wealth creation, like real long term, patient?
So I think a couple of things. One, I think we try to move equities. People talk about equities in 1 to 3 years. We really like to make it 7 to 10 years. The second thing that I highly recommend when you look at wealth products is you have to orient wealth products towards goals. So I'm buying this land parcel for this goal. I'm buying this equity mutual fund for this goal. Because if you want people to buy and hold that asset class, you should link it to really long-term goals. One of the most, and incidentally the LIC IPO is going on as we speak. Correct. Insurance is one of the most successful financial products in India in terms of keeping people there for long, because they've been able to sell and orient people towards very long-term goals. So I think there is a lot of noise made about आज इतना return कमा लिया, कल इतना return कमा लिया. Wealth products are sold on the basis of goals. And when you sell on the basis कि मैंने ये SIP शुरू की है, I have started this SIP. I'm going to have a daughter. I have started this SIP for my daughter's education in 18 years. And if you know that it's for my daughter's education in 18 years, you'll never take it out before 18 years.
Wow. That's a good one. That's a good one. Goal-oriented investment. it's really, I mean, very exciting times because it's coming from your conversation. The kind of like all the policies long-term sold were from the LIC agents. They did the hard work of educating everyone कि 20 years तक पैसा parked है उसके बाद आपको मिलेगा and all. And it's so difficult for us to convince anyone. आप में से कितने लोग 20 साल के लिए investment बेच रहे हैं कि 25 साल तक हाथ नहीं लगाइए आप अपने investment को. I think that's a change in mindset. We'll have to say, while you may have the flexibility to liquidate, because inherent it is power to you, and you need that for liquidity's sake. But really, what you're going to benefit out of is if you keep it for long. So yes, quite exciting time.
Very successful and disruptive product called bharatpond, which was done in partnership with the government of India. Is probably, I think, the best thing that I have done in my 3-4 years at Edelweiss. And historically, हमारे यहाँ in mutual fund industry, जो fixed income का पैसा होता था, it was kept for very short periods. 2 days, 5 days, 3 months. In fact, 70% of our industry's money was less than 1 year money. When we
70% was less than 1 year money.
Yeah, there was no long-term debt investing. That concept only was not there. In equity, it was long-term, but in debt, it was like when we launched Bharat Bond, we launched it in series. We said we are coming out with the 2030 Bharat Bond. This was a few years ago. This is a 10-year debt product. It was revolutionary at that time because no one believed investing in debt was 10 years. We did 5-year products, we did 3-year products. Today, Bharat Bond is a 50,000 crore program, just Bharat Bond for us. 3 years.
50,000 crores in 3 years.
Yeah, 50,000 crores in 3 years. Some of the stories are in this book. And 80% of that 50,000 crores is all long-term stuff. It's all 10-year stuff because it's been sold as 10. And now people are coming to us and saying, we love the 10-year, do 15-year and 20-year.
Amazing. So it's just education at the end of the day.
Education and orientation. And by the way, this is a product where you can take out money tomorrow. You can take it out tomorrow. Yeah. But people think of it as a 30-year product or a 2030 product.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So I think that's, so a lot of things to learn from you. Thanks for that. And so I take education as one, how you condition and orient both you, yourself, your organization, and the consumers, which will make it happen truly. Because if 70% was less than 1 year money and you have 50,000 crores of 10-year money asking for 15-year tenure, that is something. That is something. Well, yes, we have covered a lot today. What I would like to do is, if really we have questions from our audience, this would be the time to just ask our representatives, and if we can have a few questions. Till then, while you make up your mind, I just have 1 or 2. Okay. It was great to hear from you that we are ahead of the curve, truly, in the sense, naturally, as an asset class, we are desired in the country, okay? Where do we feature in your personal asset allocation space? I'm not asking you how much money you have in your personal hedge funds or PMS. We just want to know our share.
Okay. So I'll tell you the good and bad parts of my experience with real estate.
Please.
You have a very large portion in my asset allocation because I just bought a primary home. It was not from Lodha, so let me clarify that. I should also tell you that I didn't have the best experience buying a primary home. In fact, my husband and I, after our primary home purchase, said we are never buying real estate again. And yet, every year we come to each other and we're like, we want to buy some land in some area in Nashik, or Pavna, he likes to swim. So we've been having that discussion. Wow. And the only reason we don't do it is we don't have trust and transparency. And the most important thing for us, because we are capital markets people, is liquidity. So if you genuinely solve our problems, in fact, my husband, when I was coming here, he was dropping me to go somewhere. So I was telling him about what is happening. He's like, if they solve the problems, I'll be the happiest person. So you have a very large opportunity to figure in our asset allocation.
well, at least 100 people are going to pounce on your phone number after this conversation. But that's glad to hear. So we have a consumer prospect right in our midst.
And you have many of them. I mean, I know many people with my story. I mean, at least half the building WhatsApp group of mine has this story. So there are many Indians who have this story.
Thanks. That really instills confidence in us. Yeah. So what if we tell you that, again, what if we tell you that right now we just take 30 seconds on your phone to download an app, and right sitting out of here, you could buy land, create wealth for your future family and your family by just a few clicks. Would you be up for it?
I would be absolutely up for it. And if you told me that the diligence was done and the quality of land was, checked by someone of repute, I would be very interested. And by the way, I'd happily pay a premium for it, because I don't want to go learn and find land in Uttarakhand, because I just don't have the time to do it.
Absolutely. No, we'll do that for you. That's our job. That's what we've created the business for. But that's really good to hear from you. Yes, can we open it up to the audience, please?
Ladies and gentlemen, if you have questions, you can raise your hands, please.
I see one.
मैडम मैं ये पूछना चाहता हूँ, अगर सपोज कोई कॉलेज स्टूडेंट है, कॉलेज करने के बाद अगर वो थोड़ा सा कहीं जॉब पे लग जाता है और वो अपना सेविंग करके 20-25 लाख रुपया अगर जमा करता है, तो उसको कहीं एसआईपी में इन्वेस्ट करना चाहिए या उसको घर लेना चाहिए?
चांसेस आर उसके माता पिता कहेंगे उसको घर लेना चाहिए. मेरे हिसाब से एक्चुअली उसे दोनों करना चाहिए. एसआईपी वो बहुत छोटे क्वांटम से शुरू कर सकता है, बट आई थिंक इफ यू लुक एट 20-25 साल का, एंड आई टॉक टू अ लॉट ऑफ दीज कंज्यूमर्स, इंडिया में हर आदमी घर तो लेता ही है. आई मीन, आई थिंक यू कांट गेट अवे फ्रॉम दैट. डिस्पाइट ऑल माई कंप्लेंट्स अबाउट रियल एस्टेट, मैंने भी सबसे ज़्यादा अपना नेटवर्थ घर में लगाया है. तो हर आदमी इंडिया में घर लेना चाहता है, एंड हर आदमी को पेन भी हुआ है घर लेने में. एंड आई डोंट थिंक द टू आर एक्सक्लूसिव, दोनों साथ साथ भी हो सकते हैं ना.
Correct. I think that's the key. Which brings me on really the word portfolio. Could you just throw some light on asset allocation and portfolio for the commoners, I would say, the retail.
I think it takes off from his question. See,
Correct.
हमें हर चीज़ में लगता है that it is binary. It is either घर और SIP, either equity or debt. I think, और इसकी education, ये जो asset allocation आपने शब्द use किया है, I think in a very Indian parlance, it is like eating a meal that is a thali or a balanced diet. You don't just eat carbs, you don't just eat protein, you don't just eat dessert. You have a blend of things because they add different values to your portfolio. हमारी industry में, we say कि आप, you invest some in Indian stocks, but you also invest some in US and Chinese stocks, because there will be a period when Indian market अच्छा नहीं करता और China बहुत अच्छा करेगा, and there will be a period vice versa. There will be a period when property will have a significant run up and equities will have a poor year, and this year may be one of them, and vice versa. So asset allocation is like having a balanced diet, having different things in your portfolio, each of which add different value. और इसकी समझ I think हमारे consumer को अब काफ़ी हो गई है. Because this word asset allocation, ये बहुत इसका narrative शुरू हो गया.
That's a great corollary, to have a balanced diet and an Indian thali. And जैसे आपने mention किया, what have you seen in the past 3-4 years, like ETFs, gold ETFs, quant funds, passive mode of investment fund like Nifty ETF? Have they taken off? How has the market warmed up in type? Because these erstwhile hitherto not so known, थोड़ा esoteric principle वाले लगते थे. So what's your sense on those?
The last 3-4 years have completely transformed. मैं आपको, आपने फिर भी बहुत simple products का बात किया. I'll tell you about something that's a little more esoteric. In 2017, when I joined Edelweiss Mutual Fund, we had bought a company called JP Morgan, and JP Morgan runs all these global funds which basically take Indian investors' capital in mutual fund and they put it in फॉरेन फंड्स. तो एक फंड होता था एडलवाइज ग्रेटर चाइना फंड, ओके, उसमें 25 करोड़ का कैपिटल था, ओके, एंड पीपल टोल्ड मी इसको बंद कर दीजिए आप.
25 crores.
25 crores. It's a tiny, it's a minimum you can run a mutual fund with. I think 2017 happened, 18 happened. 18, 19, India didn't do particularly well. China did phenomenally. Suddenly we saw money start flowing into this fund. Today, that 32 crore thing is a 2,500 crore fund. The
Wow.
Indian consumer has picked up China. There was a phase, and China has done badly for the last 1 year, but there was a phase in 2020 when if there was a holiday in China and the fund could not declare an NAV or price, my call center would get complaints that आपका China fund इतना time बंद क्यों है? मुझे China में invest करना है. Or that is how closely, it was our highest selling fund on a day-to-day basis. We had about 10,000 customers coming to us every month just to buy a China fund.
Amazing,
And I'm
amazing.
telling you this to tell you how the Indian consumers' tastes have evolved. So new products, new asset classes have total, and the reason this has happened is in a digital world, information बहुत है.
Okay.
There are two things that have happened. There's a lot of information. There are lots of people commenting on China. There are lots of people commenting on real estate. There are lots of people teaching you about ETFs. And secondly, you can buy everything at the click of a button.
Wow. So essentially 2 or 3 things I hear. One is, and I'm presuming this is not just the only very financially savvy or the South Bombay kind of clientele,
No,
right?
no. This is a client sitting, you'll have a client sitting in Osmanabad buying a China fund.
Wow, wow. So as long as, because there is so much content, as long as there is the outreach as well as correct conditioning again and the right messaging, people are open to ideas, consumers are open to new ideas, thoughts, as well as new ways of transacting.
In fact, you know, we've almost gone to the other extreme where if you have a simple India mutual fund product, it's harder to sell because it's become boring. So we've actually gone, I think, to some
So
other
it has to have a
extreme.
novelty value.
Yeah, so it actually, you know, you started the thing by saying we're all storytellers. Our challenge is to make our basic products armed with a story.
Sure. No, so true. So true. Sorry. So thanks to your question, asset allocation pe baat aayi, and as you've rightly spoken, the conclusion is that it is not either or. It has to be the balanced diet. We have to just educate them that this is part of your balanced diet. We never looked at dals as proteins, right? हम लोग तो दाल चावल खाते थे या रोटी सब्जी खाते थे. It was ingrained into us as to why we are having minerals and nutrients from the vegetables and carbs from the roti, and which tells us अगर हम ज़्यादा नहीं दौड़ेंगे मार्केट में तो रोटी कम खानी पड़ेगी. But next question, please.
Please raise your hands if you have questions, ladies and gentlemen.
Hello. Yeah, hi Radhika. Dhaval this side.
Hi,
So, do you think that inflation is creating a hurdle in long-term investments as expenses are compounding but not the incomes are compounding?
So, I'll tell you this. This is a decade where you probably will have higher inflation. And what it means is, you know, it comes with challenges for some classes of investments. It comes with opportunities for some classes of investments. Now, if inflation is going to be higher, and price rises are what people are going to see, just to beat inflation, by the way, people will have to look at wealth creation. You know, one of the reasons, one of the
Correct,
biggest
to beat
stories we
inflation.
tell about equity investing is you have no choice to invest in equities but to beat inflation. I mean, because you're going to sit and put your money in debt today at 6-7%, and inflation is at whatever 6, 7, 8, 9. I mean, lifestyle inflation is actually higher than the printed inflation.
Absolutely.
So that
Could,
is-
could you just expand on that, please?
Yeah, so I
for
think
the
if you look at people, jitni लोगों की महंगाई है, the official prints of inflation will be 5-6%. एक्चुअली जो लोगों की लाइफ की महंगाई है, अगर आप स्कूल की फीस देखें, घर की फीस, whatever, that's probably 8-9%. our simple pitch in our industry is कि आपको equity क्यों करना चाहिए? अगर आप बैंक में पैसा रखेंगे, which is the traditional alternative, you will earn 5-6%. Minus inflation, your money is actually degrowing. So the case for buying equity or land or any of these asset classes is that to beat inflation, you have to do something. This is the only way to beat inflation.
Got it.
The simplest story for equity investing and for real estate investing is this is the way to beat inflation.
So in fact, for us as storytellers, a high inflationary environment really helps because you've beaten down at least 2-3 other asset classes
think about
hollow.
India in the 90s, जहाँ interest rates 10-15% होते थे.
True.
Inflation बहुत high होती थी. The equity movement never took off because people felt that just putting in the money in the bank was enough.
Yep.
Today, in a lower interest rate, जब बैंक में enough नहीं मिल रहा है और महंगाई आपकी earnings खा रही है, you have no choice.
No choice but to. Wow.
So this generation, which is why you see so many younger people coming in, is very different from my father's generation, which could afford to put things in FD. Today, putting money in the bank on a post-tax basis is a 3% outcome.
Wow. So it's so amazing. 10 years back, if the average age was 35-ish for you, 35 में कोई इन्वेस्टमेंट शुरू करेगा उससे बेनिफिट करेगा एज 42 43 में जब तक कहानी बताने जाएगा 50 साल का हो जाएगा और कंज्यूम नहीं कर पाएगा रियली बिकॉज देन यू आर स्पेंडिंग फॉर द नेक्स्ट जनरेशन बट नाउ दिस जनरेशन इफ दे स्टार्ट एट 23 25 27 by the time they are 35 they've really reaped the benefits if they stay long for 5 to 7 years in equities and hopefully longer with the House of Abhinandan Lodha. And they really can reap the benefits for themselves and the next generation as well because you've just started on early rather than being laggards.
Now people are telling stories of if I leave my equity portfolio. I mean, there are enough stories I've heard in my family. We had a uncle whose father bought shares of HDFC, I think it was, in 1977.
Wow.
And this uncle then went abroad and became an NRI, and he's not very money savvy, and he just came back, and he said, मेरे पास HDFC के कुछ physical certificates पता है, you know,
Dematerialize नहीं करवाया.
And he didn't realize, and then my husband said, what is wrong with you? And we found out that he had 13 crores of HDFC that was just created in intergenerational wealth, which his father had bought at the time of IPO. So now there are actually stories of people leaving wealth products as passing down. I'll pass down a portfolio to the next guy.
Sure. This is so typical of that example of a receptionist who had got the JP Morgan shares, if I'm not wrong, and she didn't know what to do with them.
We have our own
the day she retired. And, correct. Yes, we have time for maybe 1 or 2 last questions, ladies and gentlemen.
That
yes,
side, please. Can
one
we have
at
the mic
back.
that side?
Hello. Ma'am, for a new startup or a new company which is consumer driven, consumer centric, how do you instill trust into the customer?
So one is, I think there are 2 parts. One is realize that trust, and I have fought this battle for 5 years personally. So this is a question that is very close to my heart. One is because I represent a brand that competes with brands like HDFC and ICICI, and when you read Edelweiss, people don't even know if it's a Swiss company or an Indian company, and they don't even pronounce the name right. And so one thing you have to realize is trust is not going to be built immediately. It takes time. And it is a result of repeated actions. So first, don't put pressure on yourself that my consumer is going to trust me today. Secondly, I think it is very important to have a set of practices, what you will stand for, what you will not stand for. I think how you react as a brand when things go wrong with the customer, and I can say this especially in real estate, will be very, very important. All of us, you know, in ad taglines and in marketing taglines say wonderful things. But when a check fails, when the market turns, when someone needs money and times are not good for you, how you react to those single incidences, I think, build trust. I learned something very nice from my hedge fund career in 2008. And the partner of that firm, David Camiller, told me, he's like, if your portfolios are down and you haven't made money for the client, at the minimum, talk to the customer a lot. Because he said in good times, your numbers and noise and media, everything will speak for you. You don't need to speak. But in bad times, go out and proactively communicate. Wow. Yesterday, I think one of the nicest tweets I saw on our own brand was that in good times, mutual fund companies are always, the same China fund, it had a very bad period. I mean, it's lost about 20% in the last year. And this happens in financial products. The one thing that we've done is every month we organize a knowledge call on China for our consumers.
Okay.
Many consumer brands, ever since they've seen funds like this global fund succeed, launch the product. लेकिन क्या होता है जब बुरा टाइम आता है तो सब भाग जाते हैं. कोई कस्टमर के साथ कम्युनिकेट नहीं करता. बुरे टाइम में I think if you stand by the consumer that's probably the single best thing you can do to build trust in your brand.
That's a super advice. That's a super advice. Thank you.
Any more questions, please?
Yeah, I think it was quite a lot to absorb. Honestly, quite a lot to absorb and quite an eye-opener. I just have 10 questions for you now. So I think we've covered 15 questions till now. 1 घंटा लगा है. So 10 और questions के लिए ready हैं सब? Not bad.
ये rapid fire questions हैं.
Yeah, this is the rapid fire, so don't worry. You'll get 30 seconds to answer those.
And I will get a hamper like Coffee with Karan of land parcels, which I told you at the beginning.
Well, yes, in due course, yes. Since you are already a person.
You will all collect and give me land parcels. This will be the best hamper. Karan Johar won't match it. Okay.
Yeah, so your comfort food. Answer could vary in the trimester and before.
Yeah, you're asking an 8-month pregnant person what comfort food is. It's two diametrically opposite things. Stuffed panathas because I'm from North India, and pizza because I grew up in Italy.
Well, that's like stuffing on top of a paratha. Okay. Okay. Your favorite color?
My favorite color is red.
Red.
It's vibrant.
The markets are not going to like this answer.
Not in markets. Not in markets. I know, I always get that. But it's red has personality. It's vibrant. It stands out. It's got character.
Yeah. So as a Ferrari fan, I totally second that. India or US or Maldives? Where would you want to settle? That was the question, not holiday.
Okay, not holiday. So then India. And I've been asked this question hundreds of times since moving back to the US. Acha, do you regret moving back? And my answer has been not even once. Because
seriously?
Always. Wow. I write that here too. Because India offers unprecedented growth. And there's nothing like growth.
Sheer opportunity.
Yeah.
Great. Really glad to hear that. Debt or equities?
A mix. Why choose?
I knew that answer. Okay. What's the most boring chore according to you?
What's the most boring chore according to me? I mean, all this stuff, doing taxes, doing paperwork for
taxes.
Property.
Thank you so much. If you could put in a word next time you meet Ms. Sitaraman.
Doing taxes.
What do you do over the weekends? Specifically, maybe last weekend.
When I was not writing and in normal things, I actually read a lot of poetry and I try to write some. So that's typically what I do. But the way I like to lead my life is I take on one major project every 2 years as a hobby. Okay. So I had a speaking phase, then I had a book phase. Now I'm reading law text, so I'm reading the Indian Penal Code for fun.
Wow.
I just take on something new every 2 years. I think it's a...
So I think we can add 2 minutes of either a poetry or one page number this, act this. What revelation did you have in the Indian Penal Code? Either of the two.
Penal Code I'm too early to tell you about. But I will tell you one of my favorite poems, which is also in the end of this book. and it's a poem on perspective. ये मेरे father ने मुझे दी थी और मैंने desk में चिपकाई है. If anyone doesn't understand Hindi, I'll translate it. But it basically goes, it says नज़र बदलोगे तो नज़ारे बदल जाते हैं. नज़र बदलो तो नज़ारे बदल जाते हैं. सोच बदलो तो सितारे बदल जाते हैं. कश्तियाँ बदलने की ज़रूरत नहीं है, आप दिशा को बदलो तो किनारे बदल जाते हैं.
Wow, beautiful.
And it's, I'm an eternal optimist. I think what he says is that if you change the way you look at a situation, what is in front of you changes. So often in our jobs, in our situations, and we're always like, oh, the other guy has it better. Change your outlook on what you have, and you'll just see the noise around you change.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So I'll skip to the last question. In one phrase, or maybe one long sentence, we are the House of Abhinandan Lodha. This is the WealthGen Series, and thank you for being the inaugural guest speaker here. We have our audience who are gonna take this new message. It is an arduous task, we know. कि पहली शुरुआत जो भी होती है, that's the toughest. It's like you are wading through water. आप swim आगे कर रहे हैं, and फिर पीछे followers आएंगे, तो उनके लिए तो आसान होने ही वाला है. But what can you say to all of us that being at the forefront, being at the vanguard, eternal glory at the end of it, what's the satiation or what's the fulfillment at the end of it? So one message to them.
I'll tell you something I learned. Someone told me this after climbing the Great Wall of China with my father, which was one of his dreams to do. I think what you guys are going to embark on is a difficult journey. So you should not couch that. But if you can do it, it will be great. And someone told me on the Great Wall of China that if you are doing something great, it will be difficult.